I think it's time for us to introduce our last session of the day. And I'd like to invite Dr. Selina Tang to share her perspective on youth mental health, and also share the perspective from Ngee Ann Polytechnic as well. Dr. Selina, you may share your screen and start the presentation.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, hi, thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me for this today. I'm just going to be talking a bit about youth mental health. I guess a perspective from us lecturers from Ngee Ann Polytechnic. So maybe I should just start by introducing myself. I lecture within the diplomas of psychology and community development in Ngee Ann Polytechnic. I'm just going to be talking about some things that we've noticed about our youth and their mental health over the years. Okay, so we know in Singapore, youth mental health is an issue, right? Especially after the tragedy experienced at River Valley High. We don't actually have a lot of research in Singapore, but we do know, based on the little bit of research that we have and the anecdotal evidence that we have in viewing our students at Ngee Ann Poly, we know they are experiencing mental health issues, right? And it's only increasing, especially with the pandemic, right? So we see this with our youth at NP, and when we interview for early admissions exercise, a lot of the applicants have actually shared that they are interested in psychology because, one, they have had mental health issues previously or still do. They know someone with a mental health issue, or they've lost a friend to suicide. Right, and these applicants are barely 17 years old. And something about that doesn't feel right. That so many 17-year-olds have had experience with mental health issues, know someone who's had it or lost a friend to suicide. That's just not right. Right, and as lecturers, we see so many students with mental health issues. Some who have been formally diagnosed, others who should be, but are refusing to seek help or get that diagnosis, and a lot who are just on the brink. Right, so they have some issues, they probably should seek help, but really they're not doing it, they're not seeking help. So what's going on, right? So why is there this huge number of youth with mental health issues? For one, it could be academic pressure, right? We know that there's this huge emphasis on good grades in Singapore. It starts from getting to the right kindergarten. I've heard stories of parents deciding which preschool their child should go to at birth, getting them on the waiting list as soon as they can. And it's also that the child will have a good start learning to read and write so that they do well in school. And I think these are quite horrific or horror stories, right? Because from a developmental point of view, no child really needs to learn how to read or write at age 3. In fact, the bones in their hands aren't even developed sufficiently for writing at ages 3 or 4. And yet when I go past berries, so for those who don't know, berries is this famous Chinese tuition or enrichment classes. And then these really young children lining up for berries on an early Sunday morning, right, for enrichment classes. So I think it's quite fair to say that there's this huge, immense pressure on students to get good grades in Singapore, right? They spend long hours in school, spend hours on homework, even more hours at tuition. And it's first to ensure that they ace the PSLE. Right? Because success means access to prestigious schools, and it's huge. My 8-year-old nephew has decided he's going to RI, right? His friend's going to NUS high school, and they're 8. I'm so sure that at 8 years old, I had no idea what secondary school really meant, right? So what's really happening now with our children is that from a very young age, they're forced to mature much faster than they should. And that can put really a lot of immense stress on them. Counselors and psychologists are seeing kids in primary school. We've heard reports of losing 12-year-olds to suicide after they receive their PSLE results. For some students who place utmost importance on doing well in school or this academic success, performing poorly can represent a form of failure or threat, right? That triggers then a stress response. And it's hard for them to meet these really high expectations and the academic pressure placed upon them. At school or at NP, we have students that cry before every assignment due to anxiety. For a while, we would typically have at least one student experiencing a panic attack before a presentation. We always have a couple of students who are really upset after receiving a B+, right? So a lot of students are chasing perfect GPAs. And it's hard, right? How many students can actually get a perfect GPA? So I used to teach in Australia. I used to lecture in Australia. And in my first semester at NP, I had a student cry. She had a complete meltdown because she didn't do well in school. She got a B plus for her assignment. And a B plus is 75 and above, right? And my first reaction is, well, what? Like B plus, that's a really good grade. And A is a rarity. And then I realized that maybe that A really isn't that rare. And I never understood the concept of the B being the Asian F until I started teaching here in Singapore. And so the level of academic pressure that our youth are experiencing is huge, and not everyone can cope. Right? And a huge part of it is the expectations that they perceive from their parents. So so as parents, we all have expectations for our kids, right? We have expectations. We can't escape that. And what our expectations do is that they communicate to our children that what they do is important to us, right? And what they do matters a lot. So in a way, it gives them this sense of belonging, it encourages development, and our expectations also help them to forge a path, right? Hopefully to take the right path, avoid huge mistakes that they will eventually regret as adults. This is based on our experience, right? We don't want our kids to do the same things that we did or make the same mistakes that we did. What we also hold with expectations is that it can lessen the overwhelming choices that confront them, right? So for example, if our expectations for them to go to a top school, it can be experienced as our confidence in their abilities, right? It encourages them to stick with their studies when they're struggling. So it can also be seen as a motivator. But what happens when our expectations are not attuned to our children? When our fantasies of them getting to the top school does not coincide with their talents or capabilities, that's a huge blow, right, to their development. When parental expectations are not met, parents convey that disappointment. Children internalize a sense of themselves being a disappointment, right? And parental disappointment can be devastating to any child. Right? Even at my age, I'm old enough, or I don't want to say that I'm old, but even at my age, I don't want to hear my parents say that they're disappointed at me. And so when parental expectations are really high, it can start to create stress and worry for the child. If they're worrying about getting a high grade on the test, and they do get the high grade on that test, they're only going to worry about the next one. And if that isn't a top grade, then you're left with this feeling that they're just not good enough. And can you imagine living with this constant worry of not being good enough? It can be debilitating to one's mental health, right? And we hear that from our students, right? Some of them will share that they didn't enjoy secondary school because they were struggling, they were studying so hard because their parents expected them to do well in school so that they could go into JC. And some parents some of them reported that their parents weren't very keen on them entering Polytechnic, right? Because JC is where most parents want their kids to go. And then some of them talk about how they have to get a GPA, a really high GPA, so that they can get into university after poly, right? So even if they don't know what they want to do in university, if they want to go back into work, go straight into the workforce, their parents expect them to go into university because that's what people in Singapore are supposed to do. Right? So it's really natural for us to have expectations, or parents to have expectations. And as lecturers, we have high expectations of our students as well. But that's because we have confidence in their abilities. But we do need to be cognizant when they backfire, when they're too high, and they actually affect our youth's mental health negatively. Okay, and then of course, there's social media. And I know previous sessions have addressed social media, so I won't go too much into it. But we really can't ignore the fact that it does affect our youth's mental health, right? Youth are digital natives, and you'd be hard pressed to find a youth who isn't on a social media platform. In fact, I have a lot of students who spend at least 8 hours a day, right? Just checking, posting, constantly refreshing their social media. And I get it, it's fun, right? I do it. My idea of decompressing is to mindlessly scroll through Instagram. And to be honest, that's where I get most of my information about the world and life. I don't know what I'll do without social media. Okay. And it does have a lot of benefits. Okay. So we can't throw social media away. Social media does provide youth with a lot of opportunities to explore these concerns that youth have, right? Things like sexuality, dealing with parents, complaining about lecturers, right? It gives them that community. And when they share their thoughts and these issues online, they're actually learning interactively, right? They're learning interactively with groups of people outside their immediate social circles, right? So they're getting a lot of different perspectives, and it's great for education. It's also great for creating awareness, right? So last semester, as part of our modules at school, we got our students to create TikTok videos to create awareness on various issues for a lot of nonprofit organizations. Our students have also created social media posts to create awareness on mental health issues. Right? So social media has its benefits, right? Creates awareness in ways that we can't with print back in the day. Social media can also provide this means of self-expression, right? It allows the user to express themselves online. They can make changes to their self and their identity online. And that's not something that we can do in real life, right? They have this increased agency in their physical self-expression. You can edit how they're portrayed. You can select the background, the poses, the angles, right? And you can filter it. There are a billion things you can do on social media. And you can pick and choose which one you actually want to show to the rest of the world, right? And then this validates their identity claim. Only problem is that this online self-presentation and social network can also foster fragile self-esteem, right? This is pressure to be socially desirable, right? To attract attention and publicity. And chasing the likes is so addictive, right? It's addictive for everyone, but especially for youth, right? Because youth have this need for affirmation right now. And when they're not affirmed or they get bullied, like cyberbullying, that's a huge hit to their sense of self and self-worth, right? And that again compounds any mental health issues or is a cause for mental health issues. And then we have social comparison, right? People make it, and that's what we do. And that's how we determine who or what is cool, how to dress, where to eat. And this is especially so for youth that are still negotiating their identity, their self-worth. And when you're young and you want to impress or fit in, it's so tough, right? You're not just comparing yourself to the few people you actually see in school. You're comparing yourself to a whole lot more people worldwide, right? And these are manicured, they're filtered posts. It's their best life. And that's so difficult and detrimental to identity development. It can be discouraging, right? You're thinking about your progress and you're comparing it to other people who are doing so much better or look like you're doing so much better. And it's this impossible standard, right? And that makes them feel like they're not good enough or inadequate. And I have to admit that as a lecturer, we use social media to keep tabs on our students sometimes, right? I hope nobody's hearing this, right? None of our students are here today, but we do sometimes keep tabs on our students via their social media posts. Of course, we ask for permission to follow them, right? And it helps us to keep tabs on what they're doing and how they feel. We've also noticed that a lot of you have more than one accounts, right? One that's very clean, very filtered for the parents and teachers like us to stalk. And there's also another one that is less filtered. It shares their true selves, their true feelings. We've actually seen images of our students self-harming on these private accounts, right? They share their thoughts on Instagram stories, and that helps us identify the red flags, right? We keep tabs on them. We know that they're okay. And even if they're not willing to come and talk to us, we know where they're at, right? So social media really has its benefits. Oh, sorry, I haven't been clicking. Okay, so what can we do, right? As lecturers and teachers, we wear many, many hats, right? We're teachers, first and foremost. Sometimes it feels like we're their parents. We're nagging them to eat, to sleep. A lot of our students are not sleeping. They get 4 hours at night. During assignment periods, they may go 2 days without sleep. And that's so bad, especially when they already have mental health issues, right? We're reminding them to wake up early, to submit their assignments. And sometimes we're also that shoulder to cry on. Sometimes we're their person, right? I've spent hours talking to students after teaching hours. We have them on WhatsApp. We check in on them to make sure they're okay. I still check in on some of my students after they've graduated. We have we have lecturers that have gone to the hospital with their students because unfortunately they may have threatened or attempted suicide. And it's virtually impossible to draw the line on who you're going to talk to and how much you're going to talk to them about. So we try and provide support, right? We do try. But we have to remember that we're not their counselors, we're not psychologists, And so our role is primarily to encourage them to seek help. At NP or Ngee Ann Poly, we have our own counselors, right? They're available to our students. And as lecturers, we tend to refer our students to them as much as we can, right? And we also know that there are lots of new existing initiatives for our youth, things like chat, silver ribbon, limitless, and we provide students with these resources, right? We encourage them to go and see them. We tell them exactly how to go about getting an appointment. I've even offered to go down with the students if they're nervous, right? Because seeking help is not easy. We get it, right? And not that anyone has taken me up on that offer, but sometimes it's that offering to go with them that can be the nudge that some of them need to seek help. But unfortunately, a lot of our students are still not seeking that professional help, even though they need to. Okay, so research has suggested that youth are generally less likely to go to health professionals as compared to family and friends. And this is something we see with our students, right? They will talk to their classmates. They exhaust their classmates before coming to see us, our professionals. So they might start speaking with one group, and then when that group is a bit fatigued, they go on to another group of friends. And we know this because their friends come and see us. They tell us their worries. They tell us, they share with us about their friends so that we can help. And because they're also youth, they're not mentally or emotionally ready to deal with their friends' issues. So they fatigue very easily. And I don't blame them. It's really tiring, right? And we think about why they don't do this. It could be from stigma, right? Or maybe even a lack of understanding about seeking help. And some of the youth may be afraid that they'll be perceived as mentally ill by others, and being crazy is just not cool. And we also have a lot of students refusing to seek help because they're worried they'll go on some public record and affect their chances of finding employment, which is not true, right? But we do see something changing. We see a lot more students that will openly share that they have mental health issues and are seeking help. Students are now discussing mental health issues a lot more openly in class. They are less prejudiced against them. In fact, we see a lot of them being very understanding and they try to support those who need help. And that's great. But, there are a lot of things that are also going against our students in terms of seeking help, right? It could be things like practical constraints. They're in school, they have their CCA, some of them are working, so they don't really have a very big window where they can see someone, even if they wanted to. They can't afford to see a private counselor, but going through the polyclinic route, getting a referral for subsidies, and then getting an appointment at IMH is just too much effort. It's a really long way. It's hard, right? And then there's the huge hurdle of getting parental consent. A lot of times, and it's required for most, if not all counselors, students, youth must get parental consent. And many of our students are not willing to seek that consent. It could be that the parents don't understand mental health issues, they're afraid to tell their parents that they have mental health issues, or because they have issues with their parents, and that's why they need to seek help. So they don't get the consent and they don't seek help. But one of the most common reasons that we get for not seeking help is that they don't want to talk to a stranger about problems, right? I hear my students say it's weird, it's uncomfortable, they're not going to help me anyway. And they find it a lot easier to deal with, or they rather deal with their own problems rather than speak to someone. Or they're also really confident that they can handle their own problems. I don't need to talk to anyone, I can deal with it, I know what I'm doing. But we know that they can't, right? Our students nowadays are a lot busier than I ever remember being at 17, right? Like I said, they're in school, they've got CCA, some of them are volunteering, they have part-time employment, they have family issues, relationship issues, and most of them don't sleep, right? And unfortunately, when they are finally pushed past their comfort zone, they finally decide that, yes, I need help. They seek a counselor and it's bad, right? They have this horrible experience with a counselor and they're like, nah, never going again. Therapy doesn't help. I'm never going to see someone again, right? So I applaud their resilience. And to be fair, some of our youth truly are very resilient. But they need to learn that it's okay to seek help. And that's what we're seeing, that our youth know that they have issues, they're willing to talk about it, but they're not willing to seek help, right? So what we can do, or what we hope to see, is that when our youth finally are willing to seek help, they're provided with necessary support. right? At Ngee Ann Poly, so with the School of Humanities and Social Sciences, we run short courses, right? We train persons who work with youth to better support mental wellness and develop resilience, right? At this moment, we're still waiting for approval to launch a specialist diploma. Right? Our aim is to reach out to persons who work with youth in any capacity, right? We think that persons who work with youth do need skills and knowledge to support our youth, and because so many of our youth nowadays need that support. And President Halimah Yacob actually said on Facebook that parents, school, society were ill-equipped to deal with youth mental health issues. So what does that really mean for our youth with mental health issues? Right? We have so many new initiatives, we have so many treatment options, but still there are a lot of youth that are falling through the gaps and not seeking help. And we really want to have a better understanding of this from their perspective. We're collaborating with Limitless, and we're embarking on a research project to better understand the barriers to help seeking from a youth perspective. Right? We want to find out more about mental health literacy. We want to know more about what they think the level of mental health literacy is for other youth, for teachers, for parents, and that will only highlight if there is really a need to increase mental health literacy, right? Are there particular aspects of mental health literacy that require targeted education, which will then only serve to help youth, right? We're also looking at solutions to barriers for help seeking, and all this is from the youth perspective, right? We're looking at the youth perspective because we believe that youth voices will only serve to better inform mental well-being initiatives, right? So we are looking for solutions from the youth for the youth, right? Because our youth need help, right? And we think that they do deserve that help. Okay, and that's it from me. Thank you so much. Are there any questions?
Yes, there are a number of questions. If you can click on the Q&A box.
Sure. Okay, so I'll start with the first one. Okay, so how do we create an identity that doesn't tie our worth identity to our working grades? I can't tell you how to create an identity. And I understand how it's, working grades is huge to our identity, but there are also a lot of other things that contribute to our identity, right? Things like who we are as a sibling or a friend or our hobbies, for example. Right? There are so many things, and it's okay to create an identity that's tied to our working grades, but we have to recognize where we're at as well, that we're trying our best. It doesn't have to be the stereotypical A+ student that goes to your top school and then goes to NUS and NTU, right? Does that answer your question? Sorry, I realized that can participants respond, Anna? Sorry.
No, the participants will not be able to respond.
Sure. Okay, then, I hope that answers that question. Okay, and the next one is, as an educator, where do you draw the line on when it's best to step in for our students? I'm not sure what you mean by step in for our students, but we can't force our students to do anything, right? We can't force them to see someone, but at any point where they look like they need someone to talk to, we encourage that, right? It's even if you don't have a formally diagnosed mental health issue, speaking to someone is always going to be helpful. If we think that they're at danger of harming themselves, then we might speak with the parents as well. Yeah. Okay, maybe I'll go on to another question. Are the students referred to CGH? We recommend that students seek help on their own, right? So we don't refer them, but we can, if it is a very dire, we think they really need help. We can also refer them to FSCs. We can put in a referral as well. So it doesn't always have to be CGH or IMH, depending on how severe we think they are at. How often are low-income students the ones who are facing issues? It seems disproportionate. I don't have statistics for that, right? I think it does sometimes feel like the ones who are from low-income families do experience a lot of issues. Sometimes that's compounded by the fact that they have financial issues. But I don't think we should ignore the fact that people from non-low income families or even high SES families experience issues as well. I think that youth from all demographics face issues and they all deserve to seek help or should seek help. Okay. How can institutions as a whole encourage or educate significant others to better act as coping dads for these individuals? I don't know, right? I mean, as an educational institution, we can only educate our own students. We can only educate our own lecturers. I think it'll be hard to educate significant others at this point. But I think if our students learn skills or are aware of skills to support their friends, I think that's the most that we can do. Yeah. Are the students who overcome the mental issues trained in course or trained to help other students? I think that might be a hard one to answer because I'm not sure what you're referring to when you're talking about overcoming their mental issues or trained in course. But it depends on the course you go into, right? So for example, when I was talking about that our students are from the diploma in psychology or community development. So we give them the skills to work within the field, but we don't encourage them to do it to help themselves or their friends specifically, but they would be given the skills required to work within the field as associates or assistants. Yeah. Okay, how emotionally fragile are you today compared to 2-3 generation Singaporeans, and why is that so? I think it'll be hard to compare fragility, whether one is more fragile than the other. But I would say that the youth today face a lot more issues than other generations did. That's not to say that other generations didn't have their issues as well. I think every generation faces their problems, right? But so yeah, I don't think it's fair to compare or to comment that they are more fragile than previous generations. I'll just say that they have that the world has changed, right? And that there are challenges that we didn't have to deal with previously. For example, I always joke with my friends, I'm so glad social media didn't exist when we were young, or that we had digital cameras, because when we get into trouble and do stupid things, it only matters at that moment, and that there is no evidence of those stupid things that we did. And I think that's huge. Yeah. Okay, and I think the last one would be how you teach other teachers to give more of an opportunity to kids having mental issues. I think it's really about empathy to recognize signs and symptoms. It's about increasing mental health literacy. I think when we are aware of mental health issues, what it might look like, what are some of the consequences, naturally we would be a bit more empathetic. We will also have the skills to deal with it, to manage our students as well, right? And instead of, like you're saying, ruling them out. So it's really about increasing mental health literacy and maybe psychological first aid skills. Yeah. And okay, another one. What are some tips to help youth today orientate themselves to long-term careers? Wow. I don't think I'll be the best person to answer this one. I think the world has changed again. Long-term careers isn't a thing. I think the fact that there are so many opportunities to, change your career, to find something that fits you, it's not altogether a bad thing either, right? So I guess it depends on whether long-term careers are really essential, why it's important, and why you want that long-term career. But I do think it's important for youth to find a space for themselves that they're good at and that they enjoy. And I think we should appreciate the fact that in today's society, there is that opportunity to do so. Yeah, yeah. I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Perfect. Great. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Selina Tang. Thank you for doing a great session. That covers a lot more about youth mental health today.